I'm Bill Earl, National Association of Beverage Importers. We represent a different form of ethanol exported from Mexico and Canada. But, and we agree with everything the panel says about do no harm. My question is that none of the panels this morning have talked at all about the impact or potential impact of the Mexican elections, which are going to occur in less than 7 months. Could the panel address how they see that affecting the U.S. position or the attitude of Mexico in further engagement on renegotiating NAFTA?
Thanks for that question. That's a really important question. David, do you want to?
Sure, I'll take the first shot at that one. Well, there's no question that both the trade talks and the administration have had an impact on the Mexican system. In their reforms now, you can have independent candidates, which is something new. So 28% plurality will be sufficient to win the next Mexican presidential election. And so the leader of the Morena party, Lopez Obrador, has spoken out against NAFTA, spoken out against the reforms, and has a pretty populist position. So I think if the current Mexican administration believes that if you don't get a deal done by next July, then the future of a NAFTA deal would be at risk. I think that's probably right in a couple of respects. First, any new Mexican administration, unless it's the PRI, which is 10 points behind the polls right now, is likely to take some months both to staff the agencies and to formulate a negotiating position. But second, I think Lopez Obrador agrees to some extent with the administration's position that you shouldn't have foreign or independent arbitration panels determining trade disputes. So I think the ability to get a NAFTA deal that allows for ISDS would pretty much evaporate were he to win the election if that were to take a while. Local content is likely to go up. I don't think the energy reforms will be rolled back per se because they're too fundamental. But on other issues, which is whether Mexico should buy Mexican rather than trade, I think you'd see a much more challenging position after the elections than you will in the next 6 months.
I think with this licensing issue, even under the current NAFTA agreement, Mexico could backslide under an Obrador administration to show preferences and to restrict trade, to basically show preferences to their own state-owned enterprises in the energy sector, and that is one risk in my mind. But broadly, I was in Seoul and Tokyo a few weeks ago. It was actually the week before the president's arrival in Asia, and the countries in Asia are watching the NAFTA renegotiation very, very closely right now because they're gauging American behavior, negotiating behavior, and this is the first test of this administration beyond rhetoric and some enforcement measures as to what type of negotiations they'll do, whether they're multilateral, which the administration signals they don't want to do that, but even in a bilateral context. And I think it's giving a lot of countries cold feet to want to deal with the U.S. under these circumstances based on what they're observing with the NAFTA renegotiation. And so this further harms our position. I like to say that we're moving toward not so splendid isolation at this point. Other questions?
Hi, it's Devin McCarthy with the Canadian Electricity Association. I'm wondering if, we've heard seven speakers and general consensus, I would say, on the perspectives. I wonder if the panelists believe that the negotiating teams understand the level of consensus in our sector. We've tried to get that message to them by signing a submission with the Edison Electric Institute. I know API has signed a submission with CAP. So are they hearing that what we've just been discussing for the last 2 hours, and or is there a counter narrative that's also may not be here today represented, but seems to be gaining traction? Thank you.
I think our impression is that there is an understanding of a basic understanding of the energy benefits to NAFTA. I think, I think specifically on the energy chapter, the idea of all three countries and business would be benefited by locking in those energy reforms in the current state of market openness. I think what is less clear is the connection that those investments have with investment protection. And I think that that's something that if there is an understanding that energy is the success story on NAFTA, investment protection is a key part of that. And as you discuss the benefits of energy under NAFTA, you need to be looking at it from that perspective too.
And I would just follow up on that. I think that a lot of the focus thus far from the energy sector as an outside observer from the ag sector has been very much on the ISDS and the investment provisions. We have been making our position known in terms of what we would like to see as far as an energy chapter is concerned, and how that can help us to advance some of our interests from the renewable fuels perspective. So I think we are making the position known.
I think I've heard from people in the National Economic Council, the National Security Council. They've all made their views known about what's at stake in energy. I think the challenge and what they're hearing from the trade representative and others is that other things at this point are more important to the administration. This trade dispute is about autos and it's about steel. It's about the idea that you are going to essentially demand protectionist measures which would not be permissible under most trade agreements in order to maximize jobs here. And the risk is that energy will be a casualty of those negotiations. And and so far I would say the noise has not been loud enough, for the president to be convinced that this casualty could be damaging to him, to his political base, to the economy, or to the country. And I don't think, I really think that that Mr. Lighthizer, I don't think this is a bluff. I think he fundamentally believes we can walk away from these agreements and force investment home, and he's willing to live with the consequences. And until the noise or the pain is great enough to persuade him otherwise, I really think that's the direction that we're headed. And ISDS, I think, is in the biggest trouble of all because it was unpopular before. And I think there's an article Larry Summers wrote about a year ago that maybe we can shrink the scope of these international arbitration panels to a higher level of disputes because this, the so-called sovereignty movement is so powerful. But I really think this dispute is about something else, and so they completely understand what's at stake in energy, but I think they're willing to pay the price if they think they can get what they want on autos and steel.
I tend to agree with David on this, and I think one key element in all of this is going to be what will Congress do and how energized and mobilized will they become. And the key there is for constituent pressure to come to bear to motivate Congress. That's the basic formula. If Congress is concerned about their individual support in their districts, senators are concerned about support in their states with elections coming, these issues become elevated. And so now that they're getting to the late stages and near completion on a tax bill, I think much is going to pivot to the trade agenda, and it's going to be very important for all of us who care about these issues to get motivated. Respective companies need to have loud voices in these states and districts to motivate Congress to get engaged, because Congress will play a key role in this, either negative or positive, and so much depends on the audience here and beyond. We have time for one more question.
Yes, hi, I'm Kim Franken from GAO. I wanted to ask about the existing level of cooperation on things like regulatory issues or reform of the permitting process. Do you feel that progress can continue to be made in that direction, and is there anything the U.S. government should do better or more?
Well, at least in the energy space, through there have been various formulations of the North American Energy Working Group, the North American Trilateral Summit that was just held by Secretary Perry a couple of weeks ago. So the level of cooperation on things like, it's all wonky stuff, appliance standards or pipeline standards or environmental review. cyber, you know, I think it's been pretty extensive. And I think there's a will on all three parties to keep trying to do that. But NAFTA has been a big platform for that kind of regulatory cooperation. And regulatory cooperation is lowering capital costs and reducing transaction costs. That's what it means in real words. So I think they're going to try. But if NAFTA were to collapse and we were to withdraw, pretty tough to call that meeting and get everybody else to show up, I think.
I would just reinforce that. I think the cooperation is good, and the reason why it is good is because we have NAFTA, and we have these strong relationships that have been well established over the last 23 years. I think with respect to Mexico, we have very good cooperation with Mexico on a range of issues. I think what we're seeing in terms of their opening up and their deregulation of the gasoline market is this is a new step for them, and I think that enhanced cooperation around that area is helpful, and I think that is an area maybe for some additional focus.
The only thing I would add, I agree with everything that's been said, is Sempra is a member of a U.S.-Mexico Energy Business Council. We just met earlier this week, and there are 3 working groups, and they've made a series of proposals. And I would say that there's a general appreciation for a baseline of we're in a good place on regulatory coordination, but at the top of the list of that group, and this is a public-private dialogue, right? The private industry making recommendations to the government representatives with the Commerce Department and Energy Departments, is for improving it, for making it more seamless in all these different areas that are new. I think cyber is one of the ones that's the newest, the level of attention, but there are other areas. So there's room for improvement, but a desire to get there.
Well, thank you. I think we're about out of time now. I want to thank Ken and WITA for this wonderful program, and I hope it was informative to all in the audience. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for your expertise and insights. This is really important, and we'll conclude the program. And I think, Ken, you may want to make some announcements about future programs.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of you. I do want to emphasize that WITA, we want to bring in as many voices as we can. If we didn't hit all the diversity of the energy issues, I didn't think we really had the bandwidth for 3 panels today, but we are interested in hearing from all of you about ideas for things that we can cover, or speakers. When you see a topic posted, if you have ideas for additional speakers, it's how Miriam and I connected in one way, was they heard about our panel and asked if they could be part of it. We hear from occasionally from others of you, and we'd like to hear from you about ideas or people you want to have speak. We anticipate that trade will be a busy topic next year. WITA will be there, and we'll try to both get ahead of some of the issues, address the issues as they come up. As I mentioned, next week we'll have Senator Roberts and Ambassador Baucus here. We'll have additional events that we'll be announcing for next year shortly. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Charles. Thanks for bringing the historical perspective, and the importance of this issue for geopolitical reasons, I think, is one that we haven't. That might be, energy, I think, is probably more than some other topics, but I think that those issues and the larger political context of NAFTA is one that something maybe WITA needs to look at a little bit more as well. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of you. Have a happy holiday if I don't see you before then. Thank you.